welcome to the premiere episode of How Did They Do That? I'm your host, DavidLPayne. Here we'll have an informal conversation with a black and white photographer to learn how they took one of their images from out of the camera into a finished product. So we're going to learn a few of our guests' secrets. Today, we're starting this new series off with Mike Schaffner from Houston, Texas in the USA. Mike, thank you so much for being willing to share your process and a little bit of your wizardry.
Well, thank you, Dave. I'm glad to be here. I enjoy these kinds of things because I learn from as much in the discussion as from listening to other people as I do about talking. In fact, I learn more. I'll learn more than you will, probably.
I doubt that. Oh, all right. Well, as we talked about, Mike, we've opened this up to get some feedback from some of our viewers. And a couple of the questions we're going to hit today are coming from our viewers. In fact, we'll start the first question off with Yussi from Germany. And Yussi is a very talented black and white photographer.
I'm familiar with him, yes.
Here's his question. Was the captured scene pre-planned or ad hoc while you were just out on a photo walk?
Okay. Well, actually, it was a combination of both. It was a trip to Montana, and I had seen photos of this school building before, so I knew I wanted to go there. So that was planned. I will go there. I do a lot of planning for my trips. I've got an Excel spreadsheet of 500 sites I'd like to go to sometime, and I put them on a Google map. And so, because I can't remember so if I'm ever going to Montana, I've got a list of sites I'd like to stop at. And this is one of them that I gleaned the information from another photographer's photo. So I knew I wanted to go there. But the composition itself that I shot, that was determined on the scene. So I didn't go in with a set composition in this case.
So it was a little bit of both.
Yeah,
Planned
definitely
and
both. Yes.
That scene is amazing. Where was that specifically?
It's up in Savoy, Montana. It used to be a town there, but there's really not much there other than the few farmhouses and the old school.
Mike, I know that your camera uses a standard Bayer sensor, a color sensor.
Mm-hmm.
When you're shooting, I mean, your black and white is just incredible. When you're shooting, do you put the viewfinder or LCD on monochrome view, or do you leave it in color? And if you do, why?
No, I leave it in color. It works best for me. I know a lot of people talk about putting it in monochrome. And if that works for you, then go for it. I will never say you shouldn't do something. You just should do whatever works for you. For me, it works better in color. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I've taught myself how to visualize in black and white, seeing texture and contrast and detail that I want to bring out. The black and white brings out better than color. So that's one thing. So in that sense, I don't need it.
Most people are going to have a camera that you can see in colors, and that's good. For black and white photography, the conversion practice is really where you can make, I believe, that's where you make your photos stand out with black and white. It's the subtle curves, when you've got the color bands in the data on the image, you can adjust those just so to bring out certain aspects.
Right.
And it really makes a huge difference.
Yes.
So, Mike, you said, I'm sorry, excuse me. You said something earlier, and you and I know it, but our viewers may not. You talked about exposing to the right. Can you just briefly explain that?
Sure. That's when you look at your histogram, you want to push it further to the right as you can without clipping your highlights. You don't want to clip them because once you've done that, you can't ever come back from that. But you want to move to the right as much as you can because that's where all the data is. And that's what gives you the ability to make changes, bring out detail, and contrast, that type of thing. An example is if you have your data all the way to the left and you increase your exposure to get a nice photo, you'll get a lot more noise than if you went from the right and decreased the exposure, because you're just trying to pull so much data and there isn't there, so it's filling it with noise. So the data is on the right side of the histogram. That's what you want to capture as much as possible. Now, it's going to give you a horrible looking photo when you look on your LCD screen, because it's going to appear in many cases to be overexposed. I don't care, because that's not my final photo.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's helpful. Hell, I just learned something there.
Mm.
Um, which kind of leads me to the next question. Once you've got the shot and you're home and you're
Mhm.
sitting down to do what I call the important back end work, which is post processing, which software do you use and why?
I've used a number of products over the years, but right now it is basically Lightroom. For I do my basics there, and the main feature I really do there is cataloging. I like the cataloging where I could keyword things and I can find my photos, and just a way of keeping my files organized. In terms of some of the other products out there, Luminar Neo was on one. I think they're probably, you pays your money, you take your choice kind of a thing on that in terms of that part. I like Light. I used to do a lot more work in Lightroom than I do now. Right now, I do most of my work in Photoshop because it gives me options and capabilities that you just, the layer function, for example, you just can't do that, in Lightroom. So I do that. And then the third software just started using a couple of months ago was Topaz Photo AI. I use that for denoise and sharpening. I just wasn't happy with the Lightroom and the Photoshop options. And it does an excellent job, although I will say, have to be careful about using the default settings. They tend to overcook things a bit. But then I don't like doing
Yeah.
anything on default, so it's not a problem.
So Lightroom, then to Photoshop, and then
Finish up
Topaz
with
for
Topaz Photo
denoise
AI
and
for
sharpening.
denoise and sharpen.
Great. Wow, it sounds like a powerful package.
Yep.
We got a question from another one of our viewers, Jason, who lives in
Mhm.
Switzerland.
Another
He's
great
asked,
photographer.
yeah, fantastic photographer, and Boris the Wonder Dog
Mhm.
is Frenchie is personality plus. Jason asked a question that I think is going to be really helpful for a lot of folks. What's your workflow from getting the photo all the way to the finished image? Now, we could be here for an hour, but if you could just kind of highlight us through the major steps, that could be
Sure.
helpful for folks.
I tend to, now I'll warn you right off the bat, I tend to be very detail oriented. A lot of people say, "Oh, Mike, that doesn't matter. You don't need to worry about that. It doesn't make a difference." Well, I've always believed the difference between a good photo and a great photo is in the details. And so that's why I said I want to make it a photo as good as possible as I possibly can. So I'm going to pay attention to the details. So I start out with, when I go out and look at the picture, I find the scene. I want to try, don't always succeed, to slow down and really think about the composition of what do I want here? Why do I want this? Why don't I want that? That kind of thing. So I finally get my composition, take the shot. Uh, I start out exposing to the right, as I mentioned. I use a neutral picture style. In fact, I don't use any the neutral picture style. I go into my camera and I've set it where you can adjust the sharpness, the saturation, the contrast, and the color tone. Those first three, I've gone in and moved them all the way to the left. Does that make a difference? I don't know. I can't quantify it, but it's supposed to help, so I do it. So it's that kind of
Okay.
paying attention to details. I go in and set my ISO as low as possible. Practical for, one, because it reduces noise. And then I just found out the other day, you as your ISO increases, your dynamic range your camera can capture goes down.
Really?
Yeah. So I was just looking. I
Whoa.
got a new camera the other day. I finally went mirrorless, and so I was reading about it. And that's how I came up on that. And so I looked at the curves. Where there's a photo website called Photons to Photos. It's got all kinds of great data, and one of them is the ISO to dynamic range curve for every camera. And on my new camera, I looked. I lose 2 stops of dynamic range by going from ISO 100 to ISO 400. So
Whoa.
I'm gonna go as low as I can. You have to stop and think about that. Yeah, those kinds of things. So the other thing I've tried to do beforehand is learn your equipment. Another interesting tidbit I learned is these new cameras. My old one didn't have it, but they have electronic shutters and they have mechanical shutters.
Yeah.
Turns out the mechanical shutter gives you better dynamic range than the electronic. It's not much. It's a quarter to a half a stop, but again, every little bit helps.
Yeah, that's
I'm
significant.
shooting. I mean, the electronic is great for continuous shooting, that type of thing, high speed. I'm shooting landscapes and architecture and street photos. Things aren't moving around that fast. The buildings don't, I don't want them to move. I mean, if the buildings start moving, I'm running, so that kind of a thing. So mechanical shutter works fine for me. Now, if you're shooting sports or birds in flight, that may be a different story, but you got to tailor your use of the equipment to your situation. And then the last thing I do is when I go in, this isn't on the camera, but it's in the processing. I didn't do it at the time of this particular photo I took, but I now use linear profiles because that can get you a lot of detail out of the highlights and the shadows. I've seen reports you can cover 2 to 3 plus stops of data by using a linear profile than not. Because it's like the LCD screen. The manufacturer's trying to throw a pretty picture at you because you got eye candy. Because they don't want, I mentioned when I exposed to the right, the LCD looks like crap. They don't want people saying, gee, I paid thousands of dollars for this camera and look what the crappy photo. They don't want you seeing that. So they're going to pre-process it and give you a pretty picture. It's the same when it goes into Lightroom or something else. They got a curve, and this is where you hear the phrase, oh, I like the color tones I get out of Nikon better than I do Canon. Well, that's because of that curve they've got where they pre-process it before you do anything. So I'm saying, don't pre-process it. Give me the options. I'll do it. But that's when I get all that
Yeah.
data back.
Now, looking at your photos, the before and the after, just out of curiosity, it looked like there was a little bit of cropping done.
Mhm.
Do you crop at the beginning or the end of your process
At
on
the
the
end,
image?
just because, I'm a big believer in options. So if I crop at the end, I've got more options on it. I mean, if I crop at the beginning and say, gee, that doesn't look right, it's kind of, when you're 25 steps down into your processing, it's kind of hard to go back and uncrop it. And, yeah. So you got to start all over. So I do that as a final decision at the end 99% of the time. There's occasionally I'm very dead certain I'm going to crop it. I'll do that up front, but that doesn't happen all that often.
So you get all your other formatting and work and curve
Then
adjustments and everything, and then before you're finished, you do the crop then.
right, because also as you
That's a
start
great
bringing out
idea.
more detail and things, you may say, well, okay, I want to crop it here or not there, or that type of thing. That your your view may change as you see the picture develop because you're bringing out light and contrast and things that, well, gee, I brought out the contrast in this rock in the corner. I don't want that to be noticeable now, so I'm going to crop that out. Whereas before, you may have left it in because of the color, it wasn't that noticeable.
Yeah, I loved it. It was really interesting as I looked at your before and after photos, the striking nature and the small adjustment you made by that crop really It was the final checkbox.
Yeah, I mean, I
Bing,
always
great photo.
cropping. If it doesn't add to the photo, get rid of it.
What's your well, that kind of begs one last question. What's your view, Mike, on taking things out of a photo?
Ah, no, I think again that's a personal choice everybody has to do. I don't like doing it, but I try and capture the spirit of the scene, and so I will do take out things like if there's litter there that's not there permanently, I will take that out very often, unless the litter adds to the mood of the scene. If you're a gritty street scene, for example,
Yeah.
I will occasionally, twigs or branches that are coming in from the side of the frame. They're just kind of suspended in midair in the picture. I'll take those out that are distracting that don't really add anything. I've taken out power lines before a lot of times because they don't add anything. Uh, I prefer not to take a lot of things out. I'm not a photojournalist, so I try to be more towards. Boy, it's going to sound pretentious as I'll get out. I try to be more towards the artistic side. I mean, if it was a painter and they didn't paint in that telephone pole, nobody would say anything about it. You wouldn't think twice.
Good point.
Uh,
Good
yeah.
point.
So I mean, it's the case of what conveys the spirit of the scene is best is the way I look at it. Now, I try not to overdo it. I don't want to make things too perfect. I mean, it is what it is. Well, we haven't gone all the way through the workflow. There's a couple other things I would like to mention.
Go ahead.
Uh, I do what I go in. My big adjustments are I go in and make selections. I typically always select the sky. Sometimes I will select other things, refine, and I will process each of them separately. Sometimes I'll even make the black and white adjustment separately, so I could change the color slider, the dark blue, and make the sky darker, and then go down to another section and convert it to black and white. I may make the blue lighter, depending upon what's needed. So black and
Ah,
white conversion can be a local adjustment. It doesn't have to be a global adjustment. That's something else you should think about.
whoa.
Because the reason I do,
So you do like a conversion mask?
yeah, I mean, I will go in, select the sky, and then convert the sky to black and white. Sometimes I'll do the whole scene to black and white. Depends on the scene. But in this particular photo, I happened to convert the sky to black and white while the rest of it was in color. And then I went down, inverted that sky selection, and converted the bottom portion to black and white, and did my color sliders differently on each of them.
That's news to me. That's great.
Okay. Yeah. And then the
So
other
that
thing I do, and this is something you can do on your Q too, is when you do the selections, the biggest tool I use is the curves tool.
yeah.
Typically, I use that the old favorite S curve, but not always. In this one, I pulled down the midtones only in the bottom. So it's just that's where you get most of your pop is the curves tool.
Okay.
Yeah.
For our listeners out there, take a note.
Yeah.
The curves tool can really make wonderful, subtle
Mm.
changes that'll completely boost your end result.
Oh, it's amazing what it can do. Yeah. And you can, like I
Okay.
say, I adjust that on selections. I've had some photos where I've had up to 30 selections, adjusting each one
Wow.
individually. It was a cityscape. I'm doing every facade differently, individually, I guess I should say, not differently. Now, realistically, I probably could have gotten away with a lot fewer, but
I was talking with a friend of mine last week, and knowing this interview was coming up, I thought, I gotta ask Mike about this.
sure.
One of the things that he said is he'll edit a photo and then he puts it away in a special folder, as he says, to saute, let it cook a little bit. And
Yeah.
then a day or 2 or a week, sometimes he said a month later, I'll go back to look at that before I'm either gonna print it or post it. And he said, often I see it differently. Does that something that
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, I printed out my workflow because I knew we'd be talking about it. So one of my final steps is, well, let it marinate. That's my term, not saute. I marinate it.
Okay.
And I even do that at the beginning. I'll go out shooting with friends, and within hours of when we got home, they've got pictures up on Facebook. I'm going, what's the rush here, guys? You got I let it. I want the emotion of this of the experience to go away, so I can look at the photo objectively. So my stuff will sit around for maybe a week before I even start the processing, and then through the process, I will let things marinate. So I will let it marinate, and then I do what I call a first impression test. I'll go in and, I don't know, on my monitor, I have the screen go off after 10 minutes. I go and turn that off. So I put the photo up in full size, and so it's going to stay up there until forever if I want. And then I walk away and go do something for 30, 40 minutes, just get my mind up. And then I walk by the room and take a quick a glimpse at the monitors. Oh, where did my eye go first? Did it go to where I wanted it to go or not? Do that. So I go repeat this process. So I'll make a change, let it marinate again. Let things marinate 3 or 4 times different during the process. You just got to step away, come back and do it. So yeah, I'm all with that sauteing or marinating, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so I think that's great.
Ah. So now we know what Mike's special sauce is.
Yeah.
Marination.
The two other key, they're minor things, but they're another 2 things in the details that I do at the end. I check
Okay.
again for sensor spots. Now, a lot of people do that up front because, like in Lightroom, they got visualized spots, which is a
Yeah.
great tool. But keep in mind, we're bringing out detail. We're pushing the contrast. And what's going to happen? All those spots you couldn't see before,
Are
oh,
there.
they're back now. And so you're going to find spots at the end that you didn't see at the beginning. And then the other thing, because we're kind of pushing the extremes, you can get halos around things. You typically see them around the horizon line. It's a thin white line. It's very easy to get rid of. And, you can fix the halo in less than a minute, but you got to check for that. So again, that's something that happens at the end.
Oh, Mike, this has really been a lot of fun. It's been a
Yeah, I
wonderful
enjoyed the discussion.
conversation. Yeah, we're gonna have to do this again because 'cause you've got a
Mhm.
couple other photos that I'd like to
Sure.
hear how you went through it, but I think we've nailed it down pretty well. Thank you so much for helping us kick off this new series because now we know how Mike did that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's fun, and for our viewers, our next artist has already committed. Our next episode on How Did They Do That is gonna feature Russ Curlin. Check him out at RJK Photography on Vero. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, make sure you tell him I'm got some questions waiting for him because I want to get inside his head and figures out how he does it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for you viewers out there, for the next episode, now you see how this works. You got questions? Drop a comment in on the post, just like we did this time, and we'll get them. And Yussi and Jason, thank you so much for your input and your great questions. And we'll see everybody on the next episode. With
Thanks.
that, thanks for coming to Black and White Bistro, the espresso of black and white photography. Have a great day.